Hey, how you doing, Matt? So we're going to go ahead and start with your sumo deadlift here. The biggest things that I want to talk about is going to be hips, hips, hips. That's the first thing I want to talk about. So first and foremost, you got to understand that the biggest thing we're trying to do when we set up for a sumo deadlift isn't just squatting down to a lower position. It's building as much tension on that bar as you physically can while keeping your hips high and getting in the most advantageous position we can. Now, the second we squat down, we can't build tension very well. We don't get in that advantageous position and we're going to lose our hip height. So that's exactly what I'm seeing with this setup here. We're starting from here and then ask yourself, where does my hips go from here? Down. They just go down. They're not getting any closer to the barbell. You're not getting in any more of an advantageous position. And if we squat down, tension is not created on the barbell. The way we create tension on the barbell is by pressing our feet in the ground, keeping our hips as high as possible, and then wedging them in as we pull up on our upper body. It's a slow and very, very intentional process. Okay, we can't just squat down and go. That's not going to be very efficient. It's not going to accomplish those things we're looking for. So what we need to do is we need to turn what you're currently doing into something closer to. So actually, first off, we're starting here, and then we're just squatting down. Actually, more to here, and we're going. Starting here, squatting down, and going. Instead, we are going to keep our hips as high as possible, go slow as hell, and work for every inch as I press these feet into the ground. As I wedge my hips in, not down, I'm doing everything I can to keep them from going much further down, and I'm pulling my chest up. My shoulders is how my shoulders, this is how I'm connected to the barbell. So if my upper body doesn't work to get upright, I don't create any tension on the barbell. So we're turning this into this. Slow as hell, knees out, hips in, chest up. All at the same time, very slow. The last thing in the world we want is just drop them down. Instead, we're going to work for every inch, bring them in, chest up, and then up from there. All right, so we're working for every inch, being very intentional, and that's going to be the pattern I need you to use to really be able to lift as much as you're capable of in the sumo deadlift. Squat's looking good. 20 or better lifts right now. I do have a few notes on it still, though. First off, I want you to try two things right off the bat. One, I want you to fit around with a wider stance. I think your stance right now is resulting in you getting to the bottom and not being in as stacked a position as you could be in. So try going just a little bit wider, like an inch wider on each side, see how it feels. I do think in terms of long-term development that benefits you very, very much. Second thing is going to be wearing the belt higher. We have to understand that all that breath, we're trying to breathe into the belt as we set our breathing and bracing mechanics. So one of the faults you have right now with your breathing is you're breathing what I call vertically. And when vertical breathing happens, that's when you see this. You see a lot of upward movement. Ideally, when someone breathes and they're doing it correctly, no upward movement whatsoever. It's all coming from all here. We're breathing into that belt, and that's what creates intra-abdominal pressure. That's what allows us to stabilize maximally. That's what allows us to recruit as many muscle fibers as we can. It allows us to keep our spine neutral, so on and so forth. That's why we always start out with breathing and bracing. It's the most important thing in loaded movement. Now, with that being said, I want you to go ahead and wear the belt a little bit higher. The main place you're going to inflate and be able to build more IEP isn't down here below our belly button or outer belly button. It's going to be more so a little bit above. So I want you to try wearing that belt just a little bit higher and really focusing on breathing into it instead of around it or vertically. Really focus on breathing directly into it. Another thing that happens when we breathe vertically is we increase the risk of going to lumbar extension as we hinge, because oftentimes just breathing like this immediately puts your lumbar into slight extension. So I really, especially in your follow-up reps, that ended up being more of an issue. If you look at this very carefully, you'll notice that there's quite a bit of vertical breathing at play here. So look at this very carefully. Watch your upper body mainly as you take a breath in. You'll notice a lot of upward movement. So it's very minute. You have to have an eye for it. Really, really look at it right now. And you'll notice a lot of upward movement. Now, I want to turn that into breathing in the belt. That's going to really help your spine mechanics, because the rep in that set that you had the most amount of vertical breathing was the rep in that set where your perfect hinge, your hinge work went from a perfect hinge to a little bit extension as you hinge, which you can always see with how the belt moves. So just really working on those two things in your squat is going to be very beneficial, along with the slight positional change. I really do believe that, judging off your bottom position, you need to be in a slightly wider stance to be in a much more stacked and much more better position for power transfer. Last lift we're going to look at is going to be your bench press, and there's two big notes I have here. One, I really want to put some extra focus into your starting position. Your starting position, I think, is the biggest fault in your bench press, less of a fault, more of a opportunity to get better at. You'll notice that some of the really, really proficient bench pressers out there, the best bench pressers in the world, they always use their environment to get in a more advantageous position, a position they couldn't get into normally. And right now, we're not really getting much arch. When you don't get much arch, your shoulders are in much greater risk. Your shoulders, your elbows are in much greater risk for injury, and you're just not going to be in as great a position to produce heavy, or to lift heavy load. And then two, we're just not setting ourselves up well for leg drive. I personally have always strongly biased towards full foot contact with the ground, and after seeing your videos for the last few weeks, I really do believe, I firmly believe, that's going to be a better decision for you as well. There's some individuals, it's kind of a give and take. The further your feet under you, if you sacrifice full foot contact with the ground to being on your toes, the one benefit that comes with that is that you can get your feet even further under you and better your arch. So the people with massive arches, typically they'll be on their toes. And the people with really good leg drive, they typically are on their heels, or they usually have full foot contact with the ground with a little less of an arch. You right now, we're not getting much of an arch at all, and we're on our toes. So what we need to do is we need to go from toes to full foot contact, get in an uncomfortable position if need be, and get your feet as far under you as possible. And that full foot contact is going to allow you to press into your heels off the ground, which is the main place we're trying to press into, and drive back towards the spotter, towards where the press is going, rather than just pressing into the ground and your hips rising. So that's what's happening right now. Very little, if any, of the force you're generating with your feet is going to the barbell. Rather, it's just going to your hips, and your hips are rising. So what I want to do is full foot contact with the ground first off. Second off, I really want to work on your starting position, getting in a better arch, getting a better leg drive position. And I'm going to send you a video that should help with that. The video is on bench press unracking, so it's not specifically dealing with how to set up with the bench press, but at the same time, I do briefly discuss my personal setup I use, which is kind of a barbell inverted row. Get your feet far as under you as possible, and slowly set down your T-spine as close as you can to your glutes to get the best arch possible. So I want you to do something like that. Give that a shot. There's hundreds of setups out there that people use to get in better position, but right now we just need to get a better arch, better leg drive, and full foot contact with the ground. The last note I have is that I also want you to go just a little bit wider on the bar. I've yet to be wrong with something like this. It's something that's going to very much benefit you. Your bottom position, the one thing that's going incorrectly is that in your bottom position here, you'll notice, you'll notice that elbows are still quite a bit outside of your grip. Anytime we're on the bottom of the bench press, unless we're doing close grip bench press or something like that, very rarely does someone benefit from being here instead of here. We want to be in the most stacked position possible at the bottom rather than there. When we're producing force from here, it's just somewhat of an energy leak. You're not going to be in as stacked, as advantageous position as if you were here. This beautifully stacked position allows you to grind out weight and have a perfect power transfer. And in terms of long-term development, if it seems like it's a good idea to go wider on the barbell, it usually is. And I definitely think that with you, you're going to greatly benefit with it later down the road. So going from your current grip to pinky or knurling mark, or ring finger on this knurling mark here is going to be a huge benefit to you. I would start with like your pinky right on the knurling mark, if not a little bit over to the outside, and that's going to be the perfect grip from you. You're going to end up being in a much more stacked position. It'll shorten the range of motion a little bit, and you'll be able to use, in my opinion, your posterior musculature a little bit better, your lats and your traps, which all really good bench pressers utilize very well. So I want you to go ahead and make those changes for your bench press. It'll be very beneficial. I think that's just about it for this week in terms of programming. I want to create just a little bit more space between your 3 sets of 6 and back off set of 3. Your conventional deadlift's a perfect example, looks really good, about 30-pound difference. If anything, I'd like it to be a little bit higher. I want the intensity for your back off driftable to be higher, just like it indicates in the reps in reserve. So instead of challenging, it should be something closer to hard. And then for your 3 sets of 6, challenging is just fine. So pushing this to 420, 425 for 385 to 425 would have been a perfect jump, but this is one of the better examples here. If we look down to the 2 sets of 2 back off with the squat with pause, I definitely think we could have handled a little heavier load there, and I would have liked that gap better if we got closer to 400. Remember, we're looking for something around a 15% difference in load. So if your 3 sets of 6, whatever it may be, ends off at 300 pounds, 15, 30, 45, we're looking for something close to 345 for your back off work. And that'll actually stimulate those neurological adaptations we're trying to make with that strategy. So that way, when we get to heavier load later down the road, your body's much better adapted to it, and is going to be able to jump right into it with ease and hit some really big numbers a lot sooner. So this is going to be really important to make a significant difference there. And then lastly, with the 305 to 315, I really want to make a bigger difference there as well. I understand that the 3 count off the chest is tough. It is not easy. It's not easy to do that long of a pause and increase load like we should. And your body will adapt to it pretty quickly. When you're not used to doing those longer pauses with compound lifts, at first it is very hard to make a big difference between the 3 sets of 6 and 2 sets of 2. It's really hard to go up to like the numbers you should be at, which is likely something closer to like 335, 340. But your body will adapt to it really quickly. Pause work, when you're new to it, kind of sucks at first. Hard to go up and load with backloaded work that's paused, but at the same time, your body will adapt fairly quickly, and you'll actually get to a point where you should enjoy pause work even more. I personally am at that point. It took me many years to do so. I used to be a college athlete, very much relied on muscle elasticity to bounce out a hole in the bench press, bounce out a hole in the squat, but then through developing those neurological adaptations and learning how to move heavy weight very slowly and very proficiently, I've actually got to a point where I enjoy doing pause work more than I like doing bounce or touch and go work. So you'll likely get to that point very soon too, or at least start to. I think that's about it for this week. Let me know if you have any questions.